Kyle, I really want you to break this down for us. So first, how much does a justice on the Supreme Court make a year?
They make about $285,000 a year, which is not a bad salary.
Not a bad salary at all, but you're saying before she joined the Supreme Court, she had $750,000 to her name. Now Forbes is estimating $5 million. Walk us through that jump there. How did she make that much money?
Yeah. So the justices are pretty restricted on where they can make money outside of their, outside of the actual court for, I think, understandable ethical reasons. But the one exception, one really big exception there is book deals. They are allowed to make virtually unlimited amounts from book deals. And Sonia Sotomayor signed a very large book deal with Penguin Random House right after she became a justice, and they paid her $3.1 million over the next couple of years to write her memoir. She sold them the rights to her memoir. They paid her $3.1 million, and it actually ended up selling really, really well. It sold over 250,000 copies. So Penguin probably made their money back on it. But that was a pretty big check to come in. Overnight, made her a millionaire.
I do want to talk about those book sales because it was revealed there were some ethical concerns surrounding the book sales. Can you talk to us about those?
Sure. So putting her memoir aside, because her memoir was the really big, $3.1 million book deal that she made earlier on. A couple of years later, she signed book deals again with Penguin to publish a number of children's books that were somewhat based on her memoir, but some other stuff related to, activism and bilingual English-Spanish, books for children. So she signed a couple of these children's book deals as well, made about $650,000 from those. She would go around the country doing tours to, promote these books. And the Associated Press reported they got a bunch of different documents from libraries and from public universities that she was doing these, book events at. And they found that Supreme Court staff had been actively pushing the libraries of the universities, these public institutions, to buy more copies of the books, which then, flip that around, she gets royalties from every purchase that's made. So, long story short, there is you have publicly funded or taxpayer-funded, staff pushing taxpayer-funded institutions to buy the books by a person whose salary is paid for by the taxpayers. Ethics experts were not particularly delighted with this arrangement. We'll put it that way.
It sounds like there's questionable ethics here, but does it rise to any sort of consequence? Did you get in any trouble for this?
There have been a lot of ethical scandals related to finances at the Supreme Court, especially over the past couple of years. There is no mechanism to hold Supreme Court justices accountable for these kinds of things outside of impeachment, and we obviously haven't seen anything like that happen. The Supreme Court did adopt its first ever ethics code just a couple months ago, kind of in response to some of the allegations that have been raised, but they largely hold themselves accountable. There are less standards for them than almost any other federal employees.
I do now want to turn a bit to her real estate moves. She made some really smart real estate moves, and as someone who rents in New York, I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit jealous, so can you talk about those?
Yeah, I was going to say, I wish I'd bought into the New York real estate market in the 90s. She bought into the New York real estate market in the 90s. She put down $36,000, about 10% down on an apartment down in Greenwich Village. And her stake in that apartment has grown 30 times in the years since. So this is, in about 20, 25 years, it's gone up 25, 30 times in value. She now has $1.1 million in equity in that apartment. So that was basically her entire net worth when she was nominated to the Supreme Court in the first place. She had a couple personal assets, some cash and some bank accounts, but most of her net worth was just equity in her home. And it's worth even more now. So yeah, the New York real estate market has done very, very well, and Sonia Sotomayor has done very, very well with it.
Aside from that, does she have any other assets? What else makes up that fortune?
She's also got an apartment in D.C. She actually rents the apartment in New York now, so she doesn't live in it anymore because she works in D.C. all day. She owns an apartment in D.C. as well. It's done fairly well, but nowhere near as nicely as the New York one. Those are her big assets. And then the final one, of course, is what all the Supreme Court justices have, which is their pension.
That is a really nice pension. I know when you and I were talking about Brett Kavanaugh, you broke that down for us, but can you explain how the pension works again for Supreme Court justices?
It's a very, very generous pension. The nicest of any federal employee that I know of. Basically, if you're a justice or a judge and you retire and you meet certain criteria of years of service and age requirements, those kinds of things, you get your final year's salary for the rest of your life. That's pretty nice. So Sonia Sotomayor, she gets that pension. She's older than 65, so we give her that pension as part of her net worth. What do we have her at? 2.3 million, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. Is what we have her at. It's a very, very generous, very nice pension.
That pension is larger than what Forbes estimates Brett Kavanaugh's entire net worth to be. But as we're talking about different justices, can you compare them for us? The ones that you estimated their net worth so far, how does Sonia Sotomayor's stack up?
Sure. So it's worth noting on the Brett Kavanaugh point that, he isn't 65 yet. So his pension is currently valued at zero. He has to be 65 and he has to meet these requirements before we value it. But in terms of how they all stack up to one another, we have Chief Justice John Roberts at 25 million. He's the wealthiest member of the Supreme Court. And then we've got Clarence Thomas at 4 million, Sonia Sotomayor at 5 million. So those two are pretty close. And Brett Kavanaugh at 2 million. Those are the folks we've released so far.
Kyle Mullins, I appreciate your reporting. Thank you so much for joining me.